Today, Monday's daf is daf Ayin Ches. We are actually up to Ayin Ches on the base, the top of the page, the Mishnah. To the Mishnah. If somebody shechs the carbon toida lefnim, he shechs it inside. Then velachman is bread chutz l'chayma. What happens? The bread is outside the wall, and the carbon itself is inside the wall. Like kiddush alechem. Remember, we learned before that the shechita of the carbon toida is what sanctifies the bread, consecrates the bread. But if the bread was outside, it is not included. It does not become kiddush. Then the bread has to be ready. Shachti yishech actually korban before it became brown, betan in the oven. I feel the korban kulu chutz ma'achman. All the loaves of bread became brown except bar one. Loy kiddush alechem. The bread did not become sanctified. And what exactly does it mean the bread was outside of the wall? Which wall are we referring to? There's the wall around the base of Migdash. There was a wall around the Harabayis, a wall around Yerushalayim. My chutz l'chayma. What do you mean by chutz outside the wall? Rabbi Yechon says chutz l'chayma is base pagi, outside the wall, known as base pagi. Big machlek is a shayni whether it means outside of Yerushalayim. Rashi here on top of the page learns it means outside of the Har Habayis. Outside the Har Habayis. That's what Pchaim base pagi is. But somewhere in Yerushalayim. Rish Lakish says chutz l'chayma says no, it has to be inside base pagi. What it means is if it's inside base pagi, if it's outside the wall, you're not yoytza. Okay, we are up to the Ayin Ches on the base, about 8 lines on the top of the page, and we just learned that if you shech the carbon toida and the bread was outside of the wall, the bread does not become consecrated. We're trying to work out which wall we're referring to. So we had an argument between Rabbi Yechon and Rish Lakish, where Rabbi Yechon said that it means outside of the outer wall, base pagi, which can mean outside the wall of Harabayis or outside the wall of Shalayim. And Shlaki says, no, it means outside of the wall around the base of Migdash itself, around the courtyard of the base of Migdash. If it's outside of that, it does not become consecrated. The Shlakish, why does now the Gemara explains what's behind this argument? The Shlakish says it says in the pasuk that it has to be al zavar teider, it has to be al chalas lechem chometz, that the carbon is brought where the challah al means next to it. So it has to be close, inside the base hamikdash. And Rabbi Yechon says that no, al does not mean next at all. I will chutz l'chayim base pagi. It could be if it's outside base pagi. I will chutz lazar kaddish. And it's like being an albus if it's outside the shleim altogether or outside the harabayis. But it does al does not mean next to. In fact, says the Gemara, we already had this argument elsewhere. We already argued. Now we learned. You're not allowed to shech the carbon pesach and still have chametz at home. Apart from the fact that you have chametz at home, you're also over the aver of shechting the pesach while you have chametz. Now that in itself would be the question: where is that chametz? At home, or it has to be with you in the base of Migdash? Rabbi Yehuda says that's not only limited to carbon pesach. Afat tamid. If you bring up the carbon tamid, and you happen to have chametz, the one who brings it up, you're chayiv. You're not chayiv unless the person who's shechting or the person who's spraying or one of the members who are assigned to this carbon. It has to be physically with you in the azara before you're liable. And Rabbi Yechon says, Rabbi Yechon says, even though it's not with you physically in Nazara, you're liable. Again, Rabbi Yechon doesn't have to be next to you, and Shlokish also has to be next to you. So the Gemara al chometz Shlokish al means right next to you, and Rabbi Yechon doesn't have to be. So the Gemara we need both arguments. If we only knew that case over here, I would say, case of chametz, Bahika Amar Rabbi Yechon. There, Rabbi Yechon says, "Kol heichad yisa b'surukay." Well, the fact is, wherever the chametz is, it's an avera. So therefore, it doesn't have to be with you. Avol le'inyim mekadosh lechem. But in order to consecrate the bread of a carbon toida, maybe ema moedlish, or maybe it's moeded that has to be next to you. The yisa b'fnim kadosh, avrei lekadosh, only if it's inside. The yisma b'ha, we only knew about the carbon toida, the argument of Yechon Shlokish. I would say b'hakam Shlokish. Shlokish only holds over here that has to be in close proximity to the carbon. Now, b'hach, when it comes to chametz, ema moedlish, maybe it's moeded, whatever it is, it's also. Rabbi Yechon, therefore you need them both. Tanya Kavos, Rabbi Yechon, we actually learned the Braisa exactly. Rabbi Yechon, Hashaychil Asatayil Lefnim. If you shech the carbon toida inside, the lachma chutz l'chayim base pagi, the bread is outside of this, the perimeter known as base pagi. Loy kiddush halechem, but anything within that, it does become consecrated. Shocked that look, but we said it has to be at least brown. How do you know that? We learn al chalais lechem chometz yakriv. You should bring the carbon toida on top of the chalais lechem. It has to be bread already. Bread means it has to be brown. Karboni al zav malamish and len kodesh. Only can carbon put every time that the bread is on kodesh unless it's fully ready. It's brown. Yaakov Karbon Zevach Melamed. What does the pasuk come to teach you when it says Yaakov Karbon Noi Al Zevach? Melamed, it comes to teach you. She'ein al Kodesh Ein Korban PneiAtan. It comes to teach you what? When does it become consecrated? When does the bread become like a carbon? Only if it's brown. Yaakov Karbon Noi Al Zevach. That when does the bread become Yaakov Al Zevach? Only if you already shechted the animal. Melamed Ein Halechem Kodesh Elo B'Shchitas HaZevach. When does the bread become Kodesh? Only when you shecht the animal. Zevach Toide, then it says the pasuk Zevach Toide. What does that teach you? The carbon Toide Melamed Im Shachat Shaloi Lishmon. Only if the Zevach, this vichel, is done properly. But if you had in mind Loi Lishmon, you had in mind another carbon altogether, like Kiddush Halechem, the bread does not become holy. We learned Yitzin the matzah. You actually Yitzin with matzah that's sort of cooked or raw. What does matzah mean? Says the Gemara, what does that mean? Well, matzah is baked in oven. My matzah, what is that? If you break it, there are no strings. In other words, it's already partially baked. That's good enough. That's good enough. Omar. So Omar says, the same thing applies to lach metoide. That what doesn't have to be totally baked, even if it's partially baked, it's easily breakable. But as long as there are no strings, a raw piece of dough, stringy, then it's all right. Saying about a pshita, what's the chiddush here? Hachal lechem, ksim hachal lechem. By matzah says lechem, and by toide says lechem. So what's your chiddush here? The Gemara, I would have thought, the Torah emphasizes by Torah, it has to be one. So I would have thought, little price, I shouldn't take pieces. Even though it's sort of partially baked, it's like it's really pieces because it's very easy, it's very brittle, very easy to break. The fact is that it's partially baked, that's good enough. Itmar, we learned. What a toida requires 40 chalas. So we learned earlier on toida sheshach tashmein chalas. What have you had to come toida, and you brought 80 chalas? Chizki says kitchu arba metashmeinim, or kotchu arba metashmeinim. 40 out of the 80 becomes consecrated. And Rabbi says no, like kotchu arba metashmeinim. If you bring 80, nothing happens. Now the Gemara explains what's going on here. How come everyone agrees? If he says, I want 40 out of the 80 to be holy, then the other 40, why am I bringing it just as a chrayis, as a guarantee that if I lose the first 40, I have this as a replacement? Of course, kosher. If he said clearly, Al Yikachu, or I don't want 40 to become sanctified. Elin can, unless Yikachu Shmainim, unless the entire 80 becomes holy, then like kosher, nothing happens. Ki pligi b'stami, he said nothing. How do we interpret what your action is? I only wanted to consecrate 40, even though I didn't say anything, and the other 40 is purely as a guarantee that I'll always have 40 chalas. The Lord says, no, the carbon gov. If you said nothing, you thought you bring 80, it's better. You're more machmer, and therefore none of them become holy. Abaye says, no, I'll tell you what they're arguing. Everyone agrees, everyone agrees that lachrai is kamachavin. If you brought 80, you wanted 40 to be kodesh and 40 to be achrayis. Ubeklei shodas mikachin shaloi medas kamiflagi. And what they're arguing here is you didn't specify which 40 are going to be the 40 that you want. So this is like loy medas. You have no, you didn't have exactly in mind which 40 are going to be. So Mar Savar, this is called Mekachin Shalem Medas. Only 40 are there to become holy, but you didn't say which 40. Is Mar Savar, Klei Sharash Mekachin Shalem Medas. Chizki said that it becomes Kodesh, even though you didn't specify, you didn't have in mind specific. Umar Savar, and the other one holds that Klei Sharash Ein Mekachin Shalem Medas is not sanctified. That's the Machlekes Chizki Rabbi Yechon. Now, Papa goes further. Everyone knows everyone knows that it's Mekadosh Shlemedas. Well, they're arguing over here. So l'chayda 40 out of 80, and we're saying that the rest is achrayis, and 40, even though it's lemedas, which one it should be kodesh? What's the problem? But here, what makes a kodesh a knife? A knife is a clay shot. Usually, clay shot is a keli. Keli has to have some concave, something that you can a receptacle. A knife is flat, so it's a clay shot. But the question is it inferior to all other clay shotters? So therefore, in the case of a knife, lemedas wouldn't work, or is it actually superior to all the clay shotters? Because even though this doesn't have a teich, it's still considered klei shodas, and that's the argument. Masav mekadosh klei shodas, one hole that is mekadosh klei shodas. Umasav a sakra knife, keeping the lesser teich, it has no receptacle. Ain't mekadosh klei shodas. It does not mekadosh klei shodas. We can be able to say that everyone holds klei shodas. Mekadosh no das klei shodas is a mekadosh no das. Well, everyone holds that klei shodas is not effective if you don't really have in mind that it should. The stam doesn't work. You have to have in mind. Everyone agrees that the stam is like the stam, but stam, but comes to Kleshos being Mekadosh, you have to have in mind. This is the argument regarding the knife itself. So the first version was whether a knife has a din like a clay shard or mekadosh. Now we're arguing whether a knife is superior to a clay shard or not. Marzov a sakin alima clay shards. Even though clay shards cannot be mekadosh, but a sakin can because it's stronger than a clay shards. It has no tleichen yet it's a clay shards. I've got less tleichen mekadosh. It's still mekadosh. You shech the animal, the bread becomes holy. Marzov a sakin loya alima leimi clay shards. So everyone holds that sakin is not superior to clay shards, and since clay shards doesn't work, neither does a sakin. Taisus points out an interesting thing that since according to Rabbi Yechanan, ain berera, you don't, okay, let's say 40 out of 80 work, but you don't know which ones. Even if you said, I want 40 out of the 80 to be Kodesh, you didn't specify which ones. So ain berera, how do you know them? Maybe the ones that you chose are not the ones that are Kodesh. So he says an interesting thing. When you give the chalas to the Kohen, you have to give 11 chalas, not one. Why? Because since there's 80 there, could be that 10 of them are all from the chulin, of each kind. Of each species, you have 20 of each kind. You have to give 11 because could be the first 10 that you gave are all from the one that did not become kodesh. If you give 11, definitely one of them, at least one of them is kodesh. You have to give 11 from each particular species. Mishnah. If you shechted and you had in mind the wrong time, which is known as pigul, you had in mind the wrong place, kiddush halechem, the bread still becomes kodesh. We'll see the Gemara why. Why? Because your shchita was effective, and your sprinkling the blood is effective. That the pigul became pigul. If you eat it, you'll be chayiv kares. So therefore, it also the bread becomes holy because you had an effective shchita. But shachti shechted v'nimtzas treif, it turned out to be was treif all along, which means the shchita was ineffective. Then like kiddush alechem, the bread does not become sacred, sanctified. Shachta yishechted v'nimtzas balas mum. You found that the animal had a flaw. Now you would think that should be the same thing. A flaw always was, and if a flaw always was, then you didn't do a proper shchita. The Gemara later will talk about what's going on here, and also the Gemara will say we're talking about a cataract of an eye, which is considered a temporary mum, and so in a way we consider it as a mum as if it happened after the shchita. Rabbi Lezer says kiddush, the bread becomes sacred, sanctified, consecrated. Chachamim like kiddush. The chum is easy to understand. The fact is, it was a mum bal mum all along, and therefore it was ineffective. We'll understand Rabbi Lezer soon. Shachta shaloi lishma. If you shecht an animal, the taida lo lishma. So therefore, it's no longer a taida. And the same thing applies to Eila Maluyim, the ayil that they brought at the time of the Maluyim when they dedicated the Mishkan. And they also had matzahs. The two sheep of Shavuos. Sheshachten, the lambs. Sheshachten Shalishman. If you had all of them Leilishman, so it was not really the carbon that was meant to be, then like Kiddush Alechem, then obviously the bread is not consecrated. Says the Gemara Maslis, in our version of the whole event, it follows Mani Ramedi. Tanya, we learned. This is the rule. If the shchita was ineffective, this animal was already puzzled prior to the shchita, then like kiddush alechem, the bread does not become consecrated. After the shchita, then kiddush alechem, the bread does become consecrated. Shachta chutzlas mani, shechted outside of the time. So the shchita was all right; it was effective because it'll become pickle. Or chutzla became, you had in mind the wrong place. Kiddush alechem becomes kiddush. And shachta v'nimtzas treifa, but if you shechted and you found that it was treif all along, ineffective shchita, like kiddush alechem, the bread does not become Kaddish. And this is what our Mishnah, this is our Mishnah exactly. So this is our Meir's version of the argument to Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Shua. Rabbi Lezer says Kiddush, that Rabbi Lezer says, found a Balmum, the bread doesn't become consecrated. We'll soon explain why. And Rabbi Shua says, like Kiddush. That's a Meir's version. Rabbi said, no. Why Nechel could Rabbi Lezer with Rabbi Shua? They're not arguing, and everyone agrees. Shechta v'nimtzas treifa. Shechta found that as treifa was ineffective shchita. So like kiddush, everyone agrees. Al chutzlas manay shekiddush. If you did a chutzlas manay, then the bread was consecrated. It was effective. You know what they're arguing in? Not about balsmum. They're arguing in chutz lemekoymay because there's no karis. If you had in mind to eat it in the wrong place, then it's usher, but there's no karis. And the question will be whether chutz lemekoymay is compared to chutz l'zmanay, and therefore the shchita was effective and the bread becomes consecrated, or do we say that chutz lemekoymay is compared to leil l'shmai, as we'll soon see, and therefore we said before that shchita was ineffective and the bread is not consecrated. Baal balmum, and also they're arguing balmum shalei kiddush. What's that? Everyone agrees that chutz l'zmanay Kiddush, Balmum Shalai Kiddush. And they all agree that Balmum is like Kiddush. Why? Because the way the Yehuda's version is, the Balmum was an ineffective shchita. It was always a mum. But they're arguing, you had in mind the wrong place. Rabbi Lezer says, Kiddush. It becomes Kiddush. And we show him like Kiddush. Rabbi Lezer says, look, you agree with me that Chutzas Manai is what, which is puzzle, and yet the bread is consecrated. And chutzah mekayim puzzle, chutzah mekayim and chutzah mani are very similar. Same idea. You had in mind something wrong with the shchita. So I would argue, ma chutzah mani kodesh, the bread becomes consecrated. Am chutzah mekayim kodesh. That's what Rabbi Lezer says. Omer Rabbi Shua said, look. Hoya the chutzah mekayim puzzle. It's puzzle. You want to equate it to chutzah mani? I'll equate it to something else. Well, Balmum puzzle. A Balmum is puzzle. Maybe equate it to Balmum and say that the bread is not consecrated. Ma Balmum lakidish, chutzah mekayim lakidish does not become consecrated. I don't understand. What comparison is there between chutzah mekayim and having a flaw, a defect? I need the miso. I compare it to chutzah mani. And you, the misal balmum, you compare it to balmum. So let's see. Let's see who it's close to. If it's similar to chutzas manoi, then it's chutzas manoi. Let's treat it as chutzas manoi. And then I'm right. And the bread will be consecrated. And but if you can find that it's similar to balmum, then it's balmum. We'll learn from balmum that it's ineffective. So let's look. He's and Rabbi Shua agrees. Rabbi Lezer started to debate. Donin psul machshava. What's the psul of chutzas mani? The wrong thought. What's the psul of chutzas mekayim? The wrong thought. Aren't they similar? They ain't done in psul machshava, psul haguf. But a balmum is a problem, is a blemish in the animal itself. What does that have to do with chutzas mekayim? That's my argument. Comes along Rabbi Shua, he says, he's Rabbi Shua, and he also began to debate, and he said, no. Donin psul she'ein boy kares, psul she'ein boy kares. Since chutz balmum, there's no kares, it's an avera. Eat animal mum, but no kares, and chutzah mekayim is an avera, but there's no kares. So they're both sort of an inferior avera, and therefore we'll say that bread does not become holy. Chutzah mana is a very serious thing at kares, but therefore maybe the bread becomes holy. Chutzah mana has kares. Number one. Number two. Who said we're learning from Balas Mum? Let's learn from Shalai Lishmai. Loi Lishmai is also in your thought. You thought the wrong animal, and there you also agree with me that the bread has not become consecrated. So let's learn from there, and there's no chorus there. And the Shosek Rabbi Lezer remained silent. In other words, he conceded. But so according to Rameir, he says, no, they're arguing about Balas Mum. Rabbi Yehuda said they all agree Balas Mum is no different than treif. The shchita is ineffective. But Rameir said they're arguing, and Rabbi Lezer says that it becomes holy. Let's understand why. There's a mum from before the shchita. But if you found treif, that the psul before shchita, when it's about mum, you found about mum, the law of shchita. We say no, that the bread becomes consecrated. Why should it be different? Answer the Gemara, Bedukin Sheba. I'm talking about a cataract eye, but leave it up. Rabbi Kiva says, Rabbi Kiva says that the thing that that became disqualified in the Beis Hamikdash, you put it on Mizbeach when you shouldn't, it remains there. He said a cataract of the eye is like a temporary blemish. And therefore, if you put on his back, it remains there. That's why he says it's not the same as treif, and he says as if it came after the shchita, and that's why the bread becomes consecrated. But Rabbi Shua, what's Rabbi Shua going to argue with that? Rabbi Shua, also Rabbi Akiva was his Rebbe. He Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shua was Rabbi Akiva's Rebbe, but Rabbi Shua was actually Rabbi Akiva's Rebbe. But what does he argue with Rabbi Akiva about the cataract? Rabbi Shua, Rabbi Akiva. When is that interesting? Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Shua both teachers of Rabbi Akiva, and now they're arguing as to what Rabbi Akiva meant. Their student. Rabbi Akiva. When did Rabbi Akiva say Yodu that if you put something up that's disqualified on the mizbech, leave it there? Bepsula de gufe. Yes, cataract on the eye, leave it on the mizbech. It's a blemish on the body, temporary. But to go a step further and say that what? That if it's a cataract in the eye, the carbon taida, which is disqualified, it should still be able to consecrate the bread. No, you never said lie. Eat what we learned. Actually, a machlekes amaroim, who the halach is like. We learned chatas sheshachta chutzas mana. If you took a chatas and you shechted and you had him on the wrong time, him also leiteide. If we bring it on his back, you don't take it down. In other words, you had an effect of shchita. But chutzla mekayma. What about chutzla mekayma? This is the argument of Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Shua, where Rabbi Lezer says that it's still valid, and Rabbi Shua says that Rabbi Lezer says that chutz mekayma is no different than chutzas mana, and Rabbi Shua says that chutz mekayma is like shaloi l'shmoi, which means nothing happened. Is chutz mekayma is Rava says teidei. Rabbi says that it should go. You take it down. Rabbi says you should take it down, and 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 Rabbi Amar Leite. Rabbi said you should not take it down. You leave it up the. You leave it there because it's like chutzes money. Rabbi can be sure. Rabbi can be sure that well, it's like shinish and it was not effective. Therefore, you must take it out on his beich. And Rabbi holds like Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi holds like Rabbi Lezer that says no that what it called a balmum is like a chutzl mekayma is no different than chutzlas manai. Sorry, Rabbi holds a chutzl mekayma is not like Rabbi Lezer, no chutzlas manai, and therefore you put it on the mizbech and you leave it there. Rabbi Lezer. The Hodder and later Hodder by Rabba the Gabe the Rabba, then later Rabba admitted to Rabba I'm wrong that chutzl mekayma is not compared to chutzlas manai that you leave it on the mizbech, but rather to that shinish moy and bring it down. Why? With the Hodder by Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Lezer himself conceded to Rabbi Yeshua. That's one version. The Ikadam, another version is no, he did not relent. Rabbi never conceded a point. Why? What did Rabbi Yeshua say? Let's compare it to Shalai Lishmai. Let's compare it to Shalai Lishmai. And Rabbi Lezer says, you're right. They're both thought processes. You puzzle, no chorus. You're right. Lishmai, and therefore the bread does not become consecrated. Aval Hoch over here, even if Dayan is okay, I'll grant you. We'll learn from Leila Shmai. But what is it then by Leila Shmai if you put it on the Mizbech? It doesn't come down. So therefore, I rule that if it goes on the Mizbech, it doesn't come down. Imtei also it doesn't come down. We'll just go to the Mishnah. Shachta Shalei Lishma. If you shechted it, Shalei Lishma, Amar Papash, and he gave an example of Eila Hamiluyim, which is a one-off event. Amar Papash Shavak Tana Dina El Nazir didn't talk about the ram of a Nazir, the Shchiach, which is common, but not Eila Miluyim, the ram of a Miluyim. The Tana Dina, our Tana Ikim Milsanaka. Why did he choose to talk about one-off event? Because that's the first time that it happened that you had an Eila Miluyim and you had matzahs with it, and therefore he said if it was Leila Shmai, the matzahs don't become consecrated. We'll pause for a minute.